are banks that they are now complaining that they got hacked. Did they invest in cybersecurity? Are they investing now after they've been hacked? So the questions around the financial world, discovering the cybersecurity world, is actually very interesting. And we have here with us the presence of David Ferguson, which is very involved in merchant acquisitions, and he runs his own events of merchant acquisitions around the world. What is your take on cybersecurity and the financial world, and how you can help us to highlight us where are the opportunities there for companies like us?
Carlos, those are all great questions, and I'm honored to be here today to attempt to answer them. I'm actually here in two capacities. I am here as a student, as an analyst of cyber technology, of practice and process. I'm also here as a reporter, as a voyeur looking at this sector through the lens of M&A. We have the pleasure of a constituency of over 750,000 M&A professionals around the world. We have an active faculty of 500. Excuse me. We bring approximately 3,000 of those together each year for in a think tank style environment to discuss M&A and influences on it. And so that's the context that I bring to this conversation today. The core premise of our market intelligence study is that we believe that M&A really tells the truth about industries. As the last of the financial services sector elements to come back to pre-crisis level, we actually think that it reflects it's probably the best indicator of the true economy. We monitor every M&A transaction that happens every day around the world. We study who's doing it, who's investing, what are they investing in, what geographies and with whom are they engaging, with whom are they investing, financing and acquiring. And so we're identifying trends, we're interpreting market relevance, and by analyzing what's happened in the past, we try and present a predictable future. Why are we paying attention to cybersecurity? Well, there's been a tremendous amount of noise about it. What began, as was referred to at Home Depot, saw us looking squarely in the face of JP Morgan not very many months ago and wondering just how much further can this go and how could it compromise our industry. The investment financing multiples, so the nuts and bolts of what we monitored, saw average to above average valuations, and some would suggest that the future may see some of the highest valuations that we've seen to date. And a very interesting investor profile. It's rare that we would see venture capital, private equity, corporations that are already in the industry investing, as well as corporations that are not in the industry, together with government investing at the same time. This is a very rare profile. This in and of itself certainly was a flag to us. And we begun to witness acceleration of M&A activity. It's still relatively small. We think it's in its infancy, but the growth between 2011 and 2014 was quite significant. Carlos referenced our events at an international financial forum that we hosted in London in the fall, where we bring together not only M&A professionals but also policymakers, media and academics. Carlos was kind enough to deliver a short cameo address on cybersecurity. And the response that we got from our audience at that event, from the media, as well as from our constituency when we informed them, was really quite overwhelming. And so that prompted us, and very thankfully, Carlos was able to assemble a group of individuals where we hosted a Stalwarts Roundtable session at our annual M&A Advisor Summit in November. And that session is profiled here in this report that you'll find outside the door as well. And there is also an electronic version which will allow you to witness the session itself. We initiated market intel coverage on this industry immediately after Carlos's address in October. And what I'd like to share with you quickly is I'd like to just give you a quick snapshot of the history of what and how it's relevant from an M&A perspective. It's a very competitive and fragmented industry, as you know. There are about 20 companies at the top, primarily US IT and defense contractors. The speed and the disruptiveness of technology is certainly accelerating investment. $5.2 billion invested over the past 5 years. In 2013, there was $1.7 billion invested. There were 23 M&A transactions last year. And not surprisingly, the most active investors are the firms that have consistently backed the tech trends. So where are we currently? Well, I think a particularly relevant number that you wouldn't find in the M&A stats is that the attack cost estimate is now estimated at over $445 billion. And I think we're going to see that number escalate significantly as we move through 2015. 17 transactions done in the first half of 2014 compared to 23 in all of 2013. We're still waiting for the final 14 numbers to come in. Early and late stage investments are growing. Venture capital, which continues to be a key component in this industry, has invested $1.4 billion in 239 companies in 2013. Already for the first half of 2014, was almost $900 million invested. So we think the year's probably going to finish up around $2.1 to $2.4 billion. This is quite significant, and it's trending much higher than it did for social media in the early formative stages of investment. So what happens going forward? Well, I'd like to share with you our predictions. We think that the threat landscape continues to be very dynamic and multidimensional. We believe that the advances in product quantity and the technology will continue to accelerate. The innovation that we've been witness to over the last 3 years through our intensive focus would suggest that what has originated from small startups and early stage firms, that trend will continue. We are also beginning to see, and I think this conversation and certainly many of the engagements that WISeKey has had would suggest increasing security vendor collaboration. I think that's going to be paramount to the advancement of the industry. Carlos also made reference to the geopolitical factors, which are adding complexity as some foreign buyers are reticent to make investments in or to engage with product or service that may see the data secure in a market that they may not consider entirely secure. What does it mean to M&A? The leaders in the industry today, of which there are 20 top that we're following, in a total of over 500 companies that we're actually watching right now. We believe that they're going to diversify and pursue more competitive advantage by making more acquisitions so that they can provide a fuller, broader cyber service. We think that the improved global economy is going to see corporations that have underinvested in R&D historically over the last 9 years are going to increase their investment going forward. The venture capital industry is going to continue to have a strong appetite. They're already beginning to see significant returns, and I think the future is quite bright for those early stage investors. The IPO market has improved, so that then sees institutional investors playing a greater role in this, who were not part of the original engagement. Private equity, I think, is going to continue to see above average returns. They like the short holds that they're going to be able to realize in this industry, and we expect that the M&A activity is going to grow considerably. I referenced companies outside of the sector are beginning to make acquisitions as security becomes more important to them. So it won't just be the large security companies that are investing. So in conclusion, the growth of M&A transactions in the industry is directly tied to the risk of cyber attack on the financial performance of corporations, governments, and individuals. Cybersecurity management, we believe, is forecast to be one of the fastest growing industries in 2015, and we certainly don't anticipate the risk of cyber attacks abating in the foreseeable future. And so, to come full circle, M&A and investment activity will accelerate the solution development and the application process, which in turn, as those of you in our industry know, will continue to foster more investment activity. And I think has been true through the ages that safety and security really does not have a price threshold. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, David, for a comprehensive report. Just maybe to land this on very concrete facts, you know, I mean, we have here two entrepreneurs, Jean-Manuel and myself. I mean, he has been raising money all his life for companies before and now for his own company, Quant. I was myself, I've been raising money, Wiseky. I raised $100 million here in Switzerland, mainly with high net worth individuals, and because Switzerland is not yet organized very well in terms of VC, so you have here a very different type of investors than you will have, for instance, in the United States. And now Wiseky has announced an IPO end of Q1 this year, with something like $300 million being raised in a roadshow, and following very much the example of a very interesting success story like FarEye. FarEye is an Israeli company, cybersecurity company, pre-IPO, something like $200–350 million valuation. Now they are trading a $4.9 billion valuation after making the acquisition of Median Technology for $1 billion in the United States. So obviously, one of the concerns for entrepreneurs is obviously to develop your company, but what are the exits? Exits are shareholders want exit strategies. In cybersecurity, the problem you have is that it takes a while. It's not like a social media company that you start and suddenly you have 100 million downloads and then you are quoted for being $70 billion like Uber is now in the United States. This is kind of a different world. To be honest, cybersecurity, you have to build the infrastructure, get the trust attached to it, get the confidence of your clients, and only when you achieve all that, you start to build the valuation. But maybe some comments from Jean-Manuel. How difficult is it to raise money now in Europe, and what is the exits for European companies?
I think that's really an interesting point. I know, of course, the French system and the French situation much better than the rest of Europe, but in France, there is a very big effort to build an ecosystem, and actually it's quite successful in Paris and in many regions, in Nice, in Bordeaux, in Rouen, in Amiens, in Angers. It's very interesting. There are lots of initiatives. There's something called French Tech, and there's a lot of startup, a very big effort to build this ecosystem. And funny enough, those people in our government that I have met that are working at this are fantastically bright, extremely hardworking. They put out 14 hours, and they are not dogmatic at all. I mean, Axel Romeo, who's the Secretary of Digital in France, is 36 years old. She's half Canadian, half French. Emmanuel Macron was 36 years old. These guys work very hard, and everyone understands that there is a need for this. But the venture capitalists are still, I think, a little bit single-minded and only look at the B2B type of model where they only understand, I would say, all the accounting rules, and they looking at your income statement before they look at anything else. And in the case of some startups, it's not exactly the right criteria. And the other key point, I would say, systematic for Europe is that there is a need for an exit market, and there is a need for a much more liquid stock market for companies. I would venture to say, Carlos, I understand very well why you go to NASDAQ, it's a great idea, but in a way it is not normal that you would have to go to NASDAQ. There ought to be a place in Europe where companies like Wiseky should list, and there should be investors willing to take that risk then. And I don't know how to build that, but if that existed, that would be a very big advance for Europe.
Absolutely. By the way, we have Switzerland is a very active market. It's Swiss Stock Exchange. We have with us the CEO of the Swiss Stock Exchange with us in the roundtable. So there's many ways of doing it, but I guess what requires, as I say, is it's easy to find money for a certain size of organization, but you don't have necessarily the VC community that builds that. What about Germany? Germany is Berlin. I was so impressed about Berlin being the hub of startups in Europe. What is the success of Germany?
No success.
No success.
You know, I wanted actually to intervene in this question because actually my institute is also involved quite a lot in entrepreneurship. We actually had a couple of, I mean, over 20 companies on the market, and we had a couple of exits in M&A. Funny-wise, actually, only with American companies. So in the M&A process of our companies, we were always an American company, not an European one. which is one aspect you have to understand, that actually this type of M&A is very, very rare, understood by the big industry in Europe. I don't know how many M&As per year makes Siemens, but I think actually not more than probably 1, 2, or 3 per year, at least what I know. So this is one aspect. The other aspect, which is in Germany quite interesting, is actually that American companies are coming and create accelerators and innovation kind of hubs. Cisco just opened one in Berlin, where at the same time it's called innovation in their new fog technology, trying actually to capture around companies in this innovation. Microsoft same thing, Google same thing. So it's a kind of way to deal from the American companies, trying to enhance their potential future, you know, M&A, hopefully. Which is typical for at least for Berlin. Berlin at the present time, it's also another aspect is the fact that till now the government didn't understood actually what's going on. So there is no support. In France, is much more support towards you know, kind of entrepreneurship and things like that. And the last aspect in Germany is that there is not only German companies. There are a lot of Israeli companies coming, a lot of American companies around there. So it's a kind of nice mixture in Berlin, actually, of different companies. Even, as you know, our friends as a Swiss company are around in Berlin, which makes actually quite interesting environment. And I'm saying not successful because actually I don't remember, you know, I don't remember except SAP a success story in one lifetime in Germany.
Absolutely. So thank you very much. Maybe I would like to open the floor to the audience. So if you have any specific questions in any other subject or any other subject that you think is relevant to this roundtable, please. Maybe tu peux circuler là.
Thank you very much. My name is Philippe Manier from the Greater Geneva-Bern area, which is the economic development of Western Switzerland. I have a question about standard. I understand that one of the challenges of cybersecurity is to have some standard, if possible, global standard. I would like to know what is the role of ISO, if any, in this issue.
Yeah, actually, it's a very good question. ISO, we had, security expert has always dreamed to have something like an ISO 9000 certificate for cybersecurity, right? The only problem with that is that because cybersecurity is so broad, it could come from so many different ways, that is nearly impossible to come up with a standard. I mean, you can come up with standards or specific issues on cybersecurity, for instance, identity management, interceptions, access control, but it's very hard to get some kind of label. Well, one other thing which is becoming now a trend, especially now banks, and they are losing data, like in the United States, is actually creating a phenomenon where consumers are taking legal actions against the banks, and they are saying, the fact that you lost my data, it's a negligence from the bank, therefore I can sue you, I can take legal actions against you. So banks are concerned about that, because now banks, or anyone in particular, view cybersecurity interception